Good evening, India. Welcome to Welcome to a wonderful session. My name is Mani. I will introduce the session shortly. We have two beautiful speakers who are ready to go. And with that said, of course, you have many choices in this conclave. Thanks for choosing this session. This session is about diversity and inclusion. And as I said, there are many recent events that have happened that have clearly shown the benefit of having a global community and that is united beyond stereotypical diversity of gender, race, religion, orientation, caste, and class. Our ability or challenge to recognize and embrace and celebrate these differences and create positive outcomes at many levels is the need of the hour. A coach who enables clients' unique capability and is a powerful force multiplier in team and organizational coaching. And our speakers are here to share their experiences, how encouraging diversity and inclusion has amplified growth and impact based on their long experiences in this arena. We have two wonderful speakers, as I mentioned. One is Beth Bulu, and she's a PCC coach and a possibilities catalyst. She's a certified master mentor coach, a mediator, which I love, a facilitator, and more than a decade of coaching experience. Beth serves as the board president for this year in ICF Michigan, a city I want to visit, and is a volunteer mediator for family and civil court cases. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you so much, Manny.
I'll add on a little bit more about Beth. She's an author of Introvert Entrepreneur, Amplify Your Strengths and Create Success on Your Own Terms. It's a Penguin publication in 2015. Beth is also represented on coaching ethics and ICF core competencies at ICF chapters across US. And she is also a beautifully convert speaker at Washington in 2017. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you.
Please share your wisdom, and then I'll bring in Akasha and introduce him. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And yes, as you said, I want to share some perspective and some thoughts I've been having about diversity and inclusion as it pertains to coaching. And I am still in my infancy in exploring this, as I think many of us feel like we are. So I hope to offer you some food for thought and reflection this morning for me, and this evening for many of you. There are lots of aha moments when we go through coach training and learn about the coaching framework for the first time. There's learning about the power of open-ended questions, and there's realizing that you're not responsible as the coach for solving other people's problems, which is such a relief. There's understanding that listening happens with more than just your ears. And I'm sure each person that's here today has their own aha moments that they will never forget. After the initial introduction to coaching, and as you grow your skills, what I found anyway is the aha moments come at a slower pace. But if we're always challenging ourselves, they do keep coming. And I had one of my most major aha moments just about 6 months ago, about the time when I celebrated 11 years of being a coach. Here's what I realized. There's no such thing as one-on-one coaching. And here's what I mean by that. We are never coaching just an individual. We are coaching an individual that is part of an internal and external system that includes dozens, if not hundreds, or even thousands of people and life experiences and identities. That client, and I'm not going to list all thousands of them, but I do want to list a few because I think it's important for us to have this kind of context. The client brings the influence and the energy of their race, gender, ethnicity, religion, economic status, professional status, their family, friends, teachers, colleagues, neighborhoods, education, belief system, core values, traumas, and achievements. All of that is coming in with someone when they're entering into a coaching partnership. And we, as the coach, also bring those same influences and energies. And when you think about it, each of us, what we believe, our choices, our actions, and our values, is the sum total of everyone we've ever encountered. Thinking of ourselves as autonomous and independent, it's a yes and. If anyone's familiar with improvisation and those principles, it's a yes and. Yes, we are unique and there is no one like us. And that's because we each absorb pieces of the system that we are part of, and we are therefore inseparable from those systems. The ICF core competencies, the Code of Ethics, and Global's 2020 statement on diversity, inclusion, belonging, and justice, all of those call on us to consider the role that coaches play in bringing positive change to our systemic challenges of oppression and marginalization, privilege, bias, and identity. And at the same time, they also call on us to recognize, celebrate, and leverage our commonalities and our differences. Most of all, they call on us as coaches to use our coaching skills to bring about transformation that will make the world a better place. We do that by starting from the inside out, and we do it one person at a time. The thing is, once we realize that that one person represents multiple systems, and we work to intentionally bring those systems into the coaching partnership, we can increase our influence and our impact exponentially. Those documents and best practices that I mentioned before, the competencies, the code of ethics, the diversity statements, those are just the start. It's up to us as individual leaders in our profession to do our own work personally and with our colleagues at the chapter level. And I hope you're making connections during this conclave that are going to support you in doing that. Because once we step back and take this broader systems view, we start to realize where the coaching profession has both opportunities and challenges. It's relatively easy to see the opportunities. So when I read the ICF statement that was published in 2020 on diversity, inclusion, belonging, and justice, my mind, as it kind of sometimes tends to do, went to the challenges. Issues of race and gender and the class divides that come with such unbalanced distribution of wealth and education. They might show up differently in different countries, but they are all issues that we are grappling with right now. And while the coaching framework can be a powerful tool in making progress on those issues, there's another thing that we need to look at. It can also contribute to the imbalances that I just named, as access to coaching is often limited to those who are perceived to be in elite or privileged classes. And it's true, there are organizations and coaches that focus on providing coaching pro bono or at reduced rates to make it more accessible. And at the same time, it's also true that the vast majority of those that benefit from the coaching partnership are middle to upper class, educated, employed, privileged people. And that pattern is largely mirrored in those who are trained as coaches. It's a significant investment, as all of you know, of time and money to become trained and credentialed as a coach. And while there are scholarships and a growing number of programs and options out there to get training, the barrier to entry can be too high for too many. We often talk about how part of a coach's role is to hold a mirror up to our clients. And we as a profession need to hold a mirror up to ourselves if we want to bring a coach approach to all the systems that can be transformed by it. And this is why, while I was pleased that ICF made a public statement about diversity and inclusion and about our role in transforming systems, I felt generally disappointed by the substance of that statement. And that disappointment and disconnect can be summed up this way. The statement didn't make me feel the least bit uncomfortable. If a diversity statement doesn't challenge its audience and provoke at least a little bit of discomfort, and I don't mean to sound harsh, but it's little more than platitudes. I recognize that a single statement isn't going to capture the enormity of the work to be done, and it is challenging, if not impossible, to create a statement that will please everyone, especially when you have to consider a global membership that represents wildly diverse people and belief systems. But part of this work is publicly acknowledging how coaching has contributed to the problems that we are denouncing. And if we are to influence the system, we must name how we are also part of that system. Now, as I say this, I don't mean to imply that coaching does harm, not in any stretch of the word, of the sense. Please don't hear it that way. It's more that this is an invitation, not just to look at those opportunities, but to look at our blind spots, which they acknowledge in that statement, and to acknowledge the inherent privilege that we enjoy as coaches and clients, and to use that privilege for good, to keep making it a priority to create ways to make coaching and coach training more equitable and accessible for the benefit of these larger systems. Last year, I interviewed several of my colleagues about the ethical considerations of coaching, and a theme that emerged was that highly ethical coaches are mindful of the system. And that means that we consider the individual in the context of their systemic reality. We understand how we, as the coach, are part of a system. We're willing, and this requires some courage, we are willing to work with our clients to name and navigate those system challenges. And we recognize that there is no such thing as one-on-one coaching, that each client brings to the partnership some complex systems that influence them on multiple levels. I picked up a great idea that I want to pass along to you that came from a colleague last year about how to integrate this type of systems conversation into our coaching. During, we all call it something different, but during that initial discovery or intake session that you have with a new client, she suggested adding the question, what's important for me to know about you and your identity and life experiences that will help me fully support you? So what's important for me to know about you and your identity and your life experiences that will help me to fully support you? That opens the door to sharing beliefs and values and identities that shape that person's reality. And in the spirit of mutual vulnerability, you have to decide what you want to share about the systems that shape your reality and how you show up as a coach. And getting curious about this is essential to building a true partnership with your client. So I want to close my remarks with 3 questions and 1 invitation that I offer up as a way to take your awareness further. And this is where we can use the slides if you have those, and just pull up that first one. So the first question, and this is that first slide, what role can you play within your community using your coaching skills in confronting systems of oppression and facilitating healing and reconciliation and difficult conversations? The second question is, how can we balance ICF's mission? I had a feeling I was going to say that. How can we balance ICF's mission of elevating the credibility and professionalism of coaching with increasing access to those who want to be coaches and those who want to be coached? And then third, in the next slide, and this is the question I keep coming back to that I hope that you take with you. What's our work to do? For instance, you might want to have influence on race and gender inequities, but to do that, we have to acknowledge that, we alone don't have the capacity to take on the entire problem. And sometimes we can get overwhelmed with the enormity of it. But if we can take on a smaller slice of that work, then we have a chance to contribute something meaningful. And it sounds kind of contrary, but once we accept the limitations of our capacity to make change, what work is left that aligns with our skills and our purpose and our strengths? And then what resources of time, people, and energy do we need to gather to do that work? So I close with an invitation and sharing a little bit about what we're doing here at ICF Michigan. Consider how your work as a coach, and I'm sorry, this is the next slide and the final one I have. Consider how your work as a coach and how your chapter is responding to the call to be catalysts for diversity, inclusion, belonging, and justice. One of my top priorities this year as president of ICF Michigan is to adopt not only our own diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging statement, but a guiding framework to support action based on that statement. ICF Michigan's 2021 theme is belonging, And we're in regular conversation about what that means and how we can cultivate a reality of belonging for everyone. We will include commitments to action, along with what we're calling for now our North Star questions. And this concept will resonate with anyone who's familiar with Rotary International and the four-way test. The four-way test is a series of questions intended to guide Rotarians in making business and personal decisions. And we are creating a similar lens for ourselves to make sure that we keep belonging front and center. And what that sounds like is something like this. This is what we are drafting. In every decision we make as a chapter, and as a board, will it make members feel that they belong and are seen, heard, and respected? Will it facilitate engagement, participation, and community? And will it help with growth, development of skills, and sharing of knowledge? And if we have a sense of belonging, then all of those aspects will reflect the richness and diversity and the systems that we are part of. And putting this stake in the ground and living these questions is part of our work to do. And I know it's going to be imperfect and it's going to be incomplete, but we are excited to try it. So I repeat my previous question as part of this closing invitation. Will you join us in taking intentional time to ask yourself, what's my work to do? As we go on this journey, it's important, and I have to remember this, and I've had other people remind me of this. When I get impatient, and you can go ahead and stop sharing the screen, thank you. It's important that we extend grace and patience to one another throughout this process. These issues, these systems are centuries, if not sometimes thousands of years old. And ICF as an organization is only 26 years old. And many of us have been coaches for even less than that. There's tension between a very real sense of urgency and a need to meet people where they're at in this process. And coaches are trained to hold that kind of tension, and I have great faith that we can do it. And globally, my hope is that as conversations continue within the membership and coaching stakeholders, ICF will issue a powerful mandate for our profession to step up and speak out and take courageous action around dismantling oppressive systems and constructing frameworks that facilitate true belonging. Coaches are not going to save the world, but we can ask ourselves, what's our work to do? And then we can be bold in that slice of work. So thanks for being part of the conversation. And with that, I turn it over. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Beth.
You're welcome.
Powerful question on what is my work to do. That's my takeaway from this. Beautifully said. As a past Rotarian, I would love to see the four-way test that you're talking about for coaches as well. I would connect with you offline to share that with the coaches out here as well.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Please hang around till then, till Akasha finishes, so that we can take a couple of more questions from the audience. We have about more than 37 audience up here. And please, if you have any questions for Beth, go ahead and post that in the Q&A portion of the box. And with that said, let me try to bring in the next exciting speaker that we have. And he comes from a beautiful country called Grenada. And Akasha Sanders is a PhD and Master's in Human Development, an ICF PCC coach. Akasha coaches leaders through the lens of D&I while navigating the complexity of the world that we live in. When I asked him about, where does he work? He works with team in New Zealand. He stays in Grenada. And then he's also talking to me and talking to us in India. So welcome, Akasha. You are on mute, Akasha. You can turn it on.
It would be helpful if I unmute myself, wouldn't it?
Thank you. I'll complete Akasha's introduction. Dr. Akasha engages through a group of facilitation to interrogate unconscious bias, which we all tend to carry on. I have my own set of it, and I'm trying to bring them into conscious and competence level. Practice cultural humility, another beautiful topic, and acknowledge multiple perspectives. In addition, he uses adult development, gestalt facilitation, and mindfulness techniques to make them believe in their full potential. He spends most of his time between Grenada, Bermuda, with a partner, son, and a cockapoo dog. I think all Beth, me, and Akasha, all of us have dogs. And I think I've heard Akasha's son speak, and he's going to be a better speaker than Akasha, if I may say so.
I think you're right, buddy.
Okay, with that introduction, I will turn it over to Akasha. And when you're done, we can bring in Beth and Akasha together for a quick reflection. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Manny. Thank you, Beth, as well. Really enjoyed what you shared, and I know we'll get to wrap on that in a few minutes. And hello, everybody. And speaking of my son, Manny, he'll not only be a better speaker, he'll be taller than me in a few months, as he turned 15 in September. Keeps measuring himself up to me to brag about his height. So I want to zoom in a little bit on the coach, on us. You know, I mean, this conversation, I think, is certainly about how we as coaches can create spaces for our clients to feel more included, to have an experience of belonging, to actually feel seen. Something Beth mentioned earlier. I continue as I work across geographic jurisdictions, work across cultures, work across organizations, different types of organizations, pharmaceuticals, NGOs, academic institutions. Like, I continue to see where, although the systemic view and approach is incredibly important, I continue to see more and more leaders, or whatever level they are in the organization, more and more leaders actually just wanting to be seen, wanting to be understood, and, dare I say, wanting to be loved. And I continue to experience coaching as an incredible act of love. An incredible act of love. Loving ourselves, loving our clients, loving the systems that they're a part of, loving our world, actually. So that's actually really what I want to talk with you about. I could end the conversation right now and then Beth and I can continue. But I'll say a few things about why I'm saying that. So up until 2 months ago, you see I'm a Black man. I live and grew up in the Caribbean, post-colonial world, much like many other parts of the world. And I stand for Black people. I stand for people of color. I stand for all people. But recently, up until 2 months ago, I had never worked with a coach of color. I've never worked with a Black coach, never worked with an Indigenous coach, never worked with a coach from India, as in myself as a client. Never done it. I've been coached since I was introduced to coaching almost 10 years ago. All my coaches up until 2 months ago were white women. And so I've been reflecting on that for myself, about why is that for me? Why is that for me? So we can, as coaches, and I think this is important, like, we look at the team, we look at the organization, we look at the system. And I'm also saying, let's look at me. Like, what is in the way for me? What could be in my own way in actually being an agent of change for coaching to provide inclusion, diversity, and belonging for the people that I serve, the people that I love? What's in my way? And so I've had to do some soul searching about what's been in my. Why is it that I have not worked with a coach of color, whatever their gender? Why is it? So when Beth, Manny, and we met to talk about what this session might be, and I heard myself saying, the thing that I'm up to right now is how can we democratize coaching Yes, make it available to more and more people across the world, especially people in the global south, where I live and work and teach and love and so on and eat. Global south food is the best, by the way. From South India to the Caribbean to South America, global south food is the best. Um, but what is what how do we ensure that the people who have been historically left out of coaching experiences actually experience that? So democratizing coaching, and Beth also mentioned that, so taking coaching outside of the boardroom, and a lot of us I know are already committed to that work. And then the second piece, though, is a piece that I'm personally paying a lot more attention to as well. So, the first is democratizing, and then the second is decolonizing coaching. How do we also de-white coaching? I'm making that word up. How do we take some of the white culture out of coaching and actually have it be something that is infused and informed with indigenous wisdom, with wisdom that are from sort of cultures of color? Because one of the things that I notice as I engage with people like me around coaching, one of them is that they find, oh, I don't think coaching is for me. I mean, look at me. So there are access to or what might seem like barriers to access to coaching, because there's an idea that coaching is an expensive service and it's only meant to be accessed by white men in the boardroom. And so people like me, can I don't think so. So there is this sort of internalized barrier around coaching that I think we also are responsible for disrupting by actually democratizing it, but also by having coaching modalities, our own frameworks, our own way of coaching reflect other cultures in the world. Like most of the models that I was taught as a coach and that I even use today as a coach were informed by white Western cultures, weird cultures, some of us call it. Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. What about the rest of the world? What are coaching modalities that are informed by indigenous cultures, by cultures of color? That is one of my questions for myself and for us. And how do we improve coaching by infusing some of those modalities and some of those ways of thinking and ways of being, even the core competencies? How might those look if we were to adapt them, or if we were to infuse other cultural perspective in them? And how might even those core competencies reflect a broader global approach to diversity, to inclusion, to belonging? So I think I would want us to be mindful, more careful, but also to be more actively engaged in ensuring that we're not recolonizing the world through coaching by introducing certain modalities that could potentially be harmful to those that we are coaching. Because what I realize is that in my years of coaching, I I was doing myself a disservice by actually not broadening my experience of other coaches. I serve as the vice president for the Caribbean chapter, and I've never been coached by someone from the Caribbean. That's embarrassing for me. That shouldn't, for me, that's unacceptable. So recently, my son said to me, I'll show you a picture of him. My soon to be 15-year-old son, as I mentioned. See if I can share my screen, and then this will be the last thing I say, and then we'll engage in a conversation here. Share my son, who Manik, tell me if you can see my screen. I want to show
Yes, yes,
this.
I can.
Can
Yes,
you
I can.
see? Okay, there, I can see it there. That is Well, he's not 15 then. He's much bigger than this now. This is when I was proud that he was much shorter than I am. And now he's like almost looking down on me. It's like the reverse, people. It's so embarrassing. Recently, though, my soon to be 15-year-old son said to me, Dad, can you help me find a coach? I want someone who can help me work on my social skills and help me to build my business practice. He wants to be a real estate guru. And I'm like, there's so many things in that for me, but I'm going to speak about like three of them. One is, um, I wish when I was his age, I knew that I could access coaching. So we are actually doing something good as coaching across the world and building awareness about the benefits of coaching. And of course, he sees me coach. And he said to me some months ago that I love what you do and I want to be like you. I mean, that to have your child say that is like nothing else can beat that, you know. So I was super happy. But then when he said, I want to have a coach, can you help me find a coach? Oh, 15-year-old black son saying, I want to be coach. Like that's the world I want to see. Or Indian daughters and sons, or indigenous daughters and sons, or black daughters and sons saying, I want to coach, Dad. I want to coach, Uncle. I want to coach. I want a coach. So that's good. But then the other thing is, who is going to be available to coach them? So this is the thing that I find that I'm at a place now because it was so risky for me. I shared on LinkedIn and Facebook that my son is asking for a coach, and he did a nice video and said what he's looking for. And lots of people are actually reaching out, which is incredible. And so now, as a dad, I'm sitting with him and I'm like, okay, so how do you select a coach? What you cannot tell from this picture is that my son has a disability. He has cerebral palsy. And so his speech is impacted and his mobility is impacted. And for his big concern about working with a coach is that he doesn't want his disability to be coached. So while I love Beth's question is so powerful. It's like, what's important for me to know about you and your identity and your life experiences that will equip me to support you better? I love that question. And so that's the question like for my son too. While he doesn't want his disability to be coached, he also doesn't want to be invisible because that's a part of him. And so I am left wondering and exploring with my son, how do you assess for a coach that will see you, that will attend to you, all of you, not just the social skills part of you, not just the young entrepreneurship part of you, but also the part of you that has a speech impediment, the part of you that is unable to run, the part of you that is also brilliant and loves to have fun, like all these parts of you. How do you select someone? And to be honest, I want to be able to say, whatever coach uh, shows up and say, I want to work with you, Dakari. I want to be able to say, oh, all of these coaches will be good to work with. But I can't say that. And I don't even know what criteria to give my son to look for. So he's setting up these chemistry calls with these coaches. And he'll have a sense because I won't tell him. I can't tell him. It's not my place. It's his coach. And so what will he be looking for? So this is very much a learning experience for me as well. What will he be looking for? So coaches who are different from us, when they are looking for clients rather who are different from us, when they are looking for a coach that will meet them and see them, that will attend to them, that will love them, will they choose you? Will they choose me? Because we have this capacity to see them across their differences and to embrace them across their differences and to support them across their differences. Will that coach be you? That's my question for us.
Wow. Wow. You you were amazing. Dr. Akasha. And let me try to bring in Beth and let both of you have a quick reflection about what you just said. But I want to kick it off by saying that as 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 yoga and other practitioner, I have one thought process which I want to share with you. Uh, is things like breath awareness are things which are very important in yoga. Can they be competency that can be added to ICF? With that, I will just turn it over to you.
Love that question. What do you think, Beth?
I think so. Well, I love
Yeah.
this point of bringing in different models and frameworks and modalities and meaning. What has meaning to different people, to say, how does this inform how we show up as coaches and what we can offer? And in that spirit of meeting people where they're at and being open to those possibilities.
Yeah, I love that. I share in that perspective. I gotta say, like, I mean, a big yes for me, because I think it goes back to who sets the agenda, you know, and a part of that setting the agenda in my mind is what's the cultural context within which our clients live and work. That's also their agenda.
Yes.
I think that agenda question starts there, because when we bring in, you know, modalities that are from a different culture and working with our clients, I think that's a little bit of our agenda. You know,
it is. Can I ask something?
please.
Because Dr. Akasha, what came up for me as you were talking is this balancing act of honoring the context, the culture, the uniqueness and identity of the client, and being mindful of not reducing them to that. Like you said, your son does not want to be coached on his disability. He wants to be coached as who he is. So we consider it. It is a consideration. We can't ignore it, right? But we don't reduce that person to it.
Yes.
So that's just one thing I wanted to to just note, as well as even again another balance, and this is why this is so tricky, that we are not. It's not co-opting, but it's what is the phrase about when you're taking something from one culture?
Cultural appropriation.
We have to be mindful that this is that we're not tokenizing and we're not appropriating as we do this. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I so love that, Bess. One of the things that came up for me, I noticed as you were speaking, one is we're certainly not telling our fellow coaches to go and find a particular framework, you know, that's just for that's related to that client and that client's culture, and then use that. So that touches on two of the things you mentioned, because we don't unless you know the client and that is appropriate for the client. And also the permission piece with even using certain modalities. I think that's also a beautiful opportunity for co-creating with our clients, because that stuff might not matter to them. They might be like, what are you doing? I mean, I live in India, but I grew up in America. I want American stuff. You know, so it's not, so we're not saying like this is like a formula, like go and find a framework based on where your client is. I think it's such a powerful opportunity to co-create this with the client.
Yes.
You know, it's like, what matters to you? I have one of my clients, some of the times, I kid you not, some of the times our coaching session, Manny, so your question about like breathing. Some of the time our coaching session is just like sitting in meditation and just being with what arises, because that's his meaning making. That's how he wants to engage. And so my questions are coming from that space of like the cushion, from that space of just opening ourselves up. I'm not taking notes with this client at all. He wants to just be with himself and be with me. And so we just sit on the cushion and see what comes. And that works for this client. It wouldn't work for some of my white male clients in corporate America.
They're running away. They'd be like, "Oh, don't do that to me."
That's right.
I love what you said though. What matters to you? That's aligned with that idea of getting at like what's important for me to know, and what's the context and the culture with which you are approaching this process, and what's meaningful to you.
Yeah. I think with these sort of questions, Beth, I think one of the gifts in them is that they allow us to also see ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because what matters to our client might not really matter to us. And I think we have an opportunity to be honest with ourselves and saying, you know what, this is not how I want to work as a coach. And I think we have the right to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can assume that people come to this session want to infuse more inclusion, diversity, equity sort of orientations and modalities and perspectives into coaching. But that may not be the case, actually.
Exactly.
And so I think we also get to say, like, this stuff doesn't matter. Like Beth and I, we would love for it to matter to all of us.
Yes, exactly.
But if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Right.
And so we...
Go ahead.
No, you finish. It's fine. You come in.
Well, it's just, I've had this thought quite a bit because one of my mentor coach clients is reading The Advice Trap, which is sort of a sister book to the Coaching Habit, which I'm guessing a lot of folks have encountered. And one of the things that is put forward that really activated her was when we think we know, well, I mean, it seems almost obvious, but when we think we know what the client needs, that's really arrogant of us. And that's another line that I think that we walk as we work with our clients and meeting them where they're at. And yes, we're absorbing all these modalities and we want to bring this diversity, but we have to check ourselves that we are not presuming to know what is going to be best for that client. And being able to stay in curiosity, like you are, offering us so many wonderful questions to do that.
On that note, you guys are having way too much fun. So I'm going to bring in some questions to challenge both of you.
Uh-oh.
So Beth, I'll start with a couple of good ones that have come for you. One has come from Smriti Chandra, and another one has come from a coach. She's a coach, and another one has come from a general manager of a big company called HCL in India. Mm-hmm. I will put both of them together. One is, how do you contribute to community in Michigan? Would love to replicate that in Gurgaon, which is near India, Delhi, which is the capital of India. The second related question is, what has been your experience of making coaching accessible to all sections of society? So if you can take that both together, Beth, that'll be super.
Yeah. So I can speak to I'll speak to the second one first. And, this is the job or the mandate from our outreach component of our board, which is a super important part of our mission as coaches and part of this belonging. And so each year, as part of International Coaching Week, we do an outreach project where we are offering pro bono coaching to, in the past 2 years, it has been to members of a historically Black female sorority called Delta Sigma Theta. I hope I'm remembering that right. And they are often also involved in education. And so we feel like we're covering a number of different markets, I guess. That's sort of a cold word to use, but constituents or populations that would benefit from coaching. And we've also we've also provided coaching to the women leaders in Detroit area that have not had access to coaching. And so that's a very small thing. And we've had such success with offering that coaching that we're talking about, do we do it not just because of International Coaching Week, but do we make it a little bit more of an ongoing project and even select organizations that we can represent more diversity, both geographically, demographically, across the region, across the state, that we can rotate through and form relationships with. And I think that that's the real key thing. We have worked with Delta Sigma Theta now for 2 years, which, does not a relationship make. It takes longer to do that. But I think that that's part of the key to this. It's not just doing one-off sorts of engagements and saying, we're going to come in and do 3 sessions and then we're gone. But it's more, how can you form relationships? And to that end, another element of it is we are developing, and this might sound like it's playing into the privilege piece, but our hope is that by forming a corporate program, like a corporate partnership program, we can start to bring coaching more into all levels of an organization. I think that that will be the stretch, is to make sure that it's not just focusing on talking to the CEOs and those senior leaders, but instilling a coaching culture within that organization, and an awareness and a valuing of coaching. And so those are things that we're trying to do here in our little corner of the world, in Michigan, to do that. And then, as I was sharing in my remarks, the piece about how do we infuse belonging in everything that we do and say. It's hard to quantify. It's hard to put numbers and metrics and measurables to it. It's more of a feeling. And it's something that is not a one-off. My hope is that, it's a theme this year, but it should be a thread that continues long after I'm president, I hope, as part of our legacy. And we feel like if we start with that concept of belonging, then the reality of diversity, the necessity of inclusion, the criticalness of justice will all start to, belonging, we feel like, is the gateway to all of the conversation about all of those things.
I think in India, there is a country saying unity in diversity, and we have about 33 million gods. So for us, diversity is at the core of it. And still, you are saying start from belonging is the advice you would give. Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Akasha, this is one question I wanted to show to you. An easy one for you to get back.
Awesome.
But by the way, my hair is all black. It's not gray because I dyed it. So, question for you in terms of hair or anything else that we can easily answer based on where you are. But the second part of the question, this is again from the same gentleman. He's asking, how do we bring coaching for young minds? What are your thoughts? Because you talked about your son. Are we able to include other age groups beyond just 40 plus or as a paying category?
Yeah. I so love that question, because like the intergenerational space is one that I pay a lot of attention to, maybe primarily because of my son, but I also happen to do a lot of work across where people are coming across their differences. And I also do a lot of work with an organization that is also mostly white and mostly older. So we get to have these conversations a lot about how do we create space for younger coaches, younger consultants to feel they have a place, to feel they have a place in coaching, to feel they have a place in consulting. So I think one of these initial things is like looking at what are the barriers to entry for young people for entering coaching. And again, it feels like one of those opportunities where we actually get to talk with young people who want to coach. So for me, it's Beth alluded to something like this earlier, actually mentioned it as one of the things that ICF Michigan might be doing is around mentoring, but also zooming in on intergenerational mentoring. So starting at 14, starting in high school. Like I don't imagine that young people across the globe sees coaching yet as a viable profession for them, as an option for them. In the global south and the Caribbean where I live and work, it's still the usual suspects. It's still being a lawyer, it's still being a doctor, it's still being a nurse. And those professions are noble and important. And at the same time, when I work with students, adult learners, students in their early 20s, early 30s, and even 40s, and I have coaching conversations with them, they end up crying. Like 9 times out of 10, they end up crying because it's the first time in their lives, 20, 30, 40-year-olds, where they get into talk about their growth, where they get into talk about themselves, like how am I developing and growing? They've never been in those conversations before. A simple 45-minute coaching conversation. So I think that introducing coaching to younger generation to actually demonstrate that this is viable. It's fun, it's liberating. It's actually, although I agree with Beth that we're not changing the world, we're helping to make it a little bit better. And I think we can claim that. And I think we can demonstrate that to young people. Because, young people, I think more than many of us, that's what they're up to. They're so mission driven. Like they want to see the environment be better. They want to see people from different cultures experience access. So we're touching into things that really matter to them when we say, coaching can actually support with that too. And I think they'll take on to it. I would actually want to see a world where all our young people are coaches because it does so much to us as individual coaches. Like it's like it builds on our awareness or expands our awareness and our capacity for compassion and for love. And I want to see more of that in the world. Coaching is not just a profession. It's a way of being. It's a way of being.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I think what you're saying reminds me of a rite of passage kind of thought process, right?
Love it. Yeah.
Before 18 or 21, everybody says, oh, I need to have a drink, or even though there are mothers against drunk driving and things like that. What if we can say rite of passage thought process where before 18 or before 21?
I love it, Manny. Oh, Manny. It's like, Manny, you're getting me started. Like, what if that, in different countries, they have like quinceanera for 15-year-olds or sweet 16 and so on. Like, what if a gift for our young people, like you're saying, is a coaching session?
Yeah.
They have a coaching conversation when they're about to turn 15. Oh, man, this sounds amazing. It sounds so simple yet incredible. I love this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a live question from Priya. Priya, are you there? I'm just going to hand over mic to you. Priya, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Hello, excuse me, I'm in my kitchen, but the question is very pertinent. I'm loving what you guys are saying. And the question that's coming to me and the suggestion that I have is, I know we can't make young people as coaches, but how about we get them to have a coaching mindset and we get them to get them introduced to coaching at a really young age. The way of thinking, the way of being around others just becomes so much more mindful as adults, just becoming so much more mindful of being with somebody from a different gender, from a different, caste, creed, religion, community, country, all the differences and the barriers that we have created. Imagine making people mindful of that, these differences do occur and they exist. And how can you become aware of all of them while you have conversations with the people, you are in class with, in society with, in the playground with.
Thanks, Priya. Thanks for calling in from where you
You're
are.
welcome.
Beautiful.
This has been a pleasure.
So, what about that comment, Beth or Akasha? You want to?
I think that's brilliant, and that's what I was kind of thinking while we were sharing here. Is that there's the essence of coaching and the coach approach that is very that is accessible and that is so critical. And I always get discouraged when we call it soft skills. It's like, there's nothing soft about this. This is hard work. The hard work of being genuinely curious, having humility, grappling with your judgments and your biases and knowing how to manage those such that you can connect with other people and work through differences and resolve conflict and honor differences. And coaching is a powerful tool to, the coach approach is a way to do that.
Yeah, Beth, Priya, thank you as well for that suggestion, that question. It feels like we're starting a movement here, by the way. That's one of my first things I want to say. I love it so much. To add on to what Beth was saying, I heard Otto Scharmer, Theory U guy, talked about these different types of violence, and he talked about attentional violence in that conversation. Attentional violence is when we refuse to acknowledge people for who they are and what's important to them. That's attentional violence. And I see the work that we do as coaches as a remedy for that, because we're actually attending to people. We're attending to them and what's important to them. And I'm like, if we can support our children and grandchildren and students and so on with building that capacity for empathy, listen, I think what the world needs is simple. And you can laugh at me all you want. I think what the world needs is simple. I think the world needs us to just be nicer to each other, to be more empathetic to each other. Yes, there's some big things on a global and systemic stage and so on, but I think fundamentally that's where it starts. Like, how can we be actually just kinder to each other?
Yeah.
And I think coaching is a vehicle for that. And if we can support our children with building that capacity by embracing the beingness of being a coach, I think we're doing the world a good service. I think we'll be doing the world a good service.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth and Dr. Shah. Priya, he also says it's a beautiful answer. So I will thank Priya for coming online wherever she was and taking that question. We do have few more questions and few more thank yous from both of you. And let me see if I can take one last question. We have a few more minutes before we wrap it up. This one comes from another coach, PCC coach, and it's a comment, but there is few more questions and comments that I would love to. I think, Beth, thank you for answering some of them online live. So this one, it says, the challenge is how can we do this for schools and universities in an organized fashion, as opposed to making it out only to the rich kids? Definitely, I think we can go down that path. But for me, I'm kind of trying to embellish that question to my convenience, which is democratization and decolonization side of it. If I were to say that coaching has been that first 2 billion problem or solution offering, we have 7.2 billion people in the world, right? If we were to say each of the 7.2 billion people, I'm aspirational here, how do we get at least a fraction of them get coaching, if not below 15? So to me, any thoughts on the broad question, systemic questions?
I'm looking at the good doctor here. See
I'm
what?
also looking at you because I'm like, it's such a big question. I really don't know where to start, to be frank with you. And this is not, I guess my initial reaction is, it's not me, I promise. This is not me trying to like skirt the question, but that question lands in me as something that I would want to sit in me for a while before I even try to answer it. To be frank, this is where I am. This is why I'm silent for a bit.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Natasha.
Yeah.
Beth, any thoughts? Any closing thoughts?
Well, I think of what we're trying to do, and I'm a fan of taking side doors and back doors to issues. And that's in the spirit of meeting people where they're at. And that's one reason I became a mediator and took mediation training. And it's something I encourage. I think that is a powerful thing for all coaches to do, because there's so much overlap, and yet there's so much that is powerful about it, that I think it's one of those gateways. It's one of those side doors into places like schools and universities and whatnot. Conflict resolution. Everybody gets conflict and the need to be able to diffuse conflict. And so if you're meeting people where they're at with what's the presenting symptom, then we can get in there and get underneath and start to apply that and say, and while we're here, here are some ways of being that are going to have this impact of not just being reactive when there's a problem, but being proactive in preventing that problem in the first place. And so sometimes we have to acknowledge their pain first and say, okay, what's the pain point that needs to be addressed, and what's going to be the least amount of work on their end to see the connection, and then get in there and start to work from there. So it's kind of a sideways thought, but something to consider.
Thank you. Any closing thoughts from you? I know we are at the top of the hour. People are going to be soon dropping off. Anything else from Dr. Akasha? And otherwise, we'll just wrap it up from there.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on what I said a few minutes ago, you know, one of the reasons I think many of us are coaches, and I could be off here with this reason, but I think we do want to improve things. Like we do want to improve lives, and we do want to make the world better. And I think sessions like these, conversations like these, are important points for reflection on ourselves. You know, to even be asking, like, why is it that I want to make the world better? And to maybe slow down a little bit, because finding solutions and fixing problems is like, you know, it's the thing.
Right.
And sometimes that's not what's needed right away. I think sometimes even the amazing questions that are being asked here, and they're like big systemic questions, you know, like the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, like, you know, things about how do we improve society? How do we bring this to young people? Sometimes I think just sitting with those and looking at our intentions around them is as important as coming up with solutions. And I'm not sure if we do that enough. So I suppose my closing wish is that we pause, and we reflect and we ask ourselves some different questions.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think I asked a Nobel laureate once, you know, what are the solutions to big problems? He said, I don't. He frankly answered much like what you did. Money, I don't know the answers, but it all starts with one person, and if you put it on the back of one person, you can be able to do that. So thank you both for bringing beautiful questions for us to sit and reflect on. Thank you Sriram, and thank you Vikram behind the scenes for supporting us in this session, and wonderful attendees who are there with us throughout this question. Priya, and there's many questions that came about. Thank you, all of that. I deeply appreciate it. Let the conversation continue outside of this room as well.